known as the Bible timeline. So we spend a lot of time in the beginning. We've talked about God and His nature as the Godhead before creation. Talked a little bit about time. No, I'm not going to talk a lot about time this time. Oh, why not? And we talked about the realm of which God exists, that which Paul referred to in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 as that third heaven. Second heaven being where stars and such exist, and the heaven that we live in, as it's called the heavens, this atmosphere that we live in, would be the first one. We talked the last couple of weeks about Genesis 1:1. And what is peculiar about Genesis 1:1? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What is peculiar about that? Nothing's peculiar at all. Okay, moving on. What is peculiar about Genesis 1:1? Everything that is in the universe is in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning is time, God, force, created, energy, the heavens, matter, space, and the earth, matter. Everything that is in the universe falls into one of those five realms. He was already there. All things that were created in the beginning. But before that, God existed from eternity. From eternity. We have tried to wrap our minds around what eternity is, but we can't. But there was a beginning. Jesus spoke in Matthew 19, verses 3 through 8. Said the Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? And he answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning? From the beginning. So there's a beginning. There are a couple of verses, at least two that I like to refer to. Ephesians chapter 1:4 that talks about that there was something that before the foundations of the world. Now, it's hard for us to grasp what the foundations of the world, but when Paul is writing to the church at Ephesus, and then he again writes to Titus in Titus 1:2, and he talks about those things that were from eternity. The foundation of the world, from the very beginning of what you and I live in now. In the beginning. We looked at day number 1. And we've talked about the fact that when God created in those days, and that's why I ask if we have an astrophysicist who can actually explain time to us, that a day used here, the word for day in day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and I don't have room for day 7, but day 7, is the Hebrew word yom. And it means a 24-hour day. And in each day, it talks about that there was evening and there was morning. There was the night and then there was the daylight. And that is what it takes to make a 24-hour day. That's what's been given to us. And each day, that exact same phrase is used. And when Moses gave the 10 Commandments, he will talk about in Exodus. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, God is going to set up the Sabbath day, and the Sabbath day was something that was for the Jews only. It would be that which identifies them. It says, remember the Sabbath day in Exodus 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant, your female servant, or your livestock or your sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days The Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So, Moses has been given this command about the Sabbath day. He says, for in 6 days, in 6 days, the Lord made the heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. So on your quiz that I gave out, and I asked you, how many days did it take for the Lord to create all that there is? 6 days. 6 days. That seems like I'm really harping on that. But we have a movement that is telling us that the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis are metaphorical. It's not real, but it just sort of gives us a sense that there was a beginning. It's not denying that God created it, but he's saying that it's a story to make us feel good, as is how man fell from grace. The Garden of Eden is metaphorical for something, and the flood is metaphorical for something, and the Tower of Babel is metaphorical for... You get the idea, don't you? It's not real. It's not actual. But when Jesus says that from the beginning, and when Jesus says it, because he is known, in eternity he was known as what? He was known as the Word. And he, Hebrews 1 tells us that by him all things were created. By Jesus, all things were created. So, in the beginning, God created, and the word for God is Elohim. And that word is plural, which means it's speaking of the Godhead. For in verse 2, it tells us that, all the way back, and by the way, this much of the book of Genesis, let me get back here to Genesis chapter 12, just to make it accurate, that much of the Bible covers roughly the first 2,000 years of history. This covers the next 2,000. Just to put it in proportion for you. For it says, the earth was without, verse 2 of Genesis 1, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the waters. That Spirit, capital S, is the Holy Spirit. So, God said, let there be light, and there was light. How there is light without light sources, such as the sun, we don't know. But God said, let there be light. And there was light. As easy as you and I turn on that switch, there is light. And God saw that the light was good. Notice that he says he saw that it was good. In chapter 1, we're going to see that saying, and God saw that it was good. And what does that mean, God saw that it was good? He could see because the light was on, yeah. He was satisfied with what he made. It was good. It's good. And when God says it's good, guess what? It's good. It's good. And, let's see, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning the first day. There was evening, and there was morning, and we talked a little bit about this. That is how the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, had defined day. Day begins in the evening with the sunset and goes on to the next sunset. That's how we begin our days. How? At the crack of dawn for me. No, the crack of noon. We do it at midnight. That's when things start, unless you're on Zulu time or you're on Greenwich time or military time, all of that. But God reckoned that day was going to start for that. Does that mean we still have to follow that today? The nays have it. Okay, so we don't have to. And the darkness called, there was evening and there was morning the first day. Day number 1 in this. He created the heavens and the earth. He had darkness and light, evening and morning, and we reckon that to be, as we know it, a 24-hour day. Now we come down to day 2. Verse 6, and God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning the second day. When he called that expanse heaven, does that mean he created the place where he's dwelling? No. This heavens is what we are in now. We call that the heaven, the first heaven. We talked about the first heaven, the second heaven, the third heaven. And when you're in love, you're in the seventh heaven. Yes, okay. That won't be on the quiz, but I just thought I'd throw that in there. So here we have that he creates that expanse. It's the atmosphere. He's created the atmosphere here. And when it says he separated, and I have a picture, and that's the original picture. They took a picture of it when they were there, so we know what it looked like. If you believe that. And so it said it separated the waters. There's a thought that way above us, there was a thickness of actual water. We aren't really told that, but that's what we have assumed that it was. And we have speculated that it was the water that purified the sunlight coming through so that we no longer could, and you can make up a lot of things. But all we know is what we are given. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And God called the expanse heaven, that which we live in from the ground all the way up to whatever sphere that is, to where we no longer have that air that we breathe.
RSV calls it
The dome in the sky. That's reasonable. It's the dome in the sky. I'm trying to think of what the name of the energy drink was. If it was Monster Drink or one of these energy drinks that sponsored the man, it's been maybe 2 or 3 years ago. He went up to 50,000 feet in a hot, well, it wouldn't have been a hot air balloon, but and then he jumped out and free fell for, it seems to me it was more than 50,000 feet from way, way up. And we discover things about our atmosphere that are pretty astounding. Anybody here like to go out at night and watch, we call them shooting stars. They're really not. If it was a shooting star, we'd be gone, but they are meteorites. Meteors. A meteorite hits the ground, what you find, but a meteor goes through. And we see one that streaks across the sky and we think, man, that must be the size of a house. Anybody know how big those meteors are? Yeah, smaller than a house. Yeah, they're many times just a grain of sand is all it takes. And our atmosphere protects us from those things. Once in a while, something the size of a basketball will slip through and cause a sonic boom. But we're protected by our atmosphere. Was that the original atmosphere? Let's wait till we get to Genesis chapter 6 when we talk about the flood and thereafter. But this expanse was created so that we have the air to breathe for men, animals, everything else that goes on there, and that is second day. There was evening and there was morning the second day. And the day again is the same as the first day, Yom. Same word that will be used in Hebrew for all the days. And God said in verse 9, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. We'll stop right there in the middle of the third day. What is it that God created? The land, yes. He created the land. He separated the waters. Peter tells us in his letter that out of water everything was made. Wilma, I know I put you on the spot last week as someone who had a chemistry degree of how this happens, but we didn't come up with that answer. But it says that he separated the waters and dry land appeared. And why is that important that dry land is going to appear? It's kind of obvious. Yeah, we're going to have some place to put our feet. Okay? So he creates land here, and he called the dry land earth. Let's see, this tells me down here, or land. He calls it earth. The waters were gathered together. He called seas. And now we come down to verse 11. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which there is their seed, and according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning the third day. So he creates dry land, and he creates vegetation. And what is peculiar about this vegetation that is true even today? After its kind, what did you say? Mature and fully grown. And it has seeds. Listen, woman, because I'm going to call on you to answer it.
But I've heard that it had never rained before on the earth, and that's why it was so spectacular of an event. People didn't know what rain was. Is there any proof of that? And did God just water the earth from?
I bet you would like to hear what I have to say about that. When we get to chapter 2, there's going to be something that's going to help us with that, although definitively say this is exactly what it looks like. Many people say that it had never rained, which is one of the peculiarities of why people probably made fun of Noah. You're building a what? Now, it doesn't mean that they never had boats. They probably would have liked to go on rivers, rafting and canoe trips with their families. Sure. Maybe not, but that he's building an ark, a boat, for what? Because it's going to what? It's going to rain? What is rain? What? So when we get to chapter 6, there'll be chapter 2, and then again in chapter 6, we'll look at that. So he brings forth the. Did that answer it? Or yes, go ahead. Yes, many people believe that the flood is going to be the game changer. The flood is going to change everything because up to the flood, animals and man were vegetarians. And the Bible tells us this, that we were vegetarians. Does that mean we should be vegetarians today? If you tell me yes, we're going to have to arm wrestle over pork. Remember, I'm just saying. But up to that point, for the first one, and you can do the genealogies and add the letters or the years together, 1,656 years from what we gather from the genealogies in chapter 5, that for that many years, I believe you're right. I believe it was a greenhouse in which things grew at a fabulous rate. Not only plants and trees, but also animals and humans. Yeah, maybe not my size, but yeah, they were. Yeah, yes, and they're going to live many years. So it would have been spectacular to be in that, and it was, at least in the beginning in the garden, it was a lush place. Things were created their full, their maturity. Yes. We'll go with that for now, yes. God took all that away and changed things.
Why did he choose meat then after?
One more thing I got to ask him. Yeah, things changed once the flood was over and done with. Things changed, and when we get there, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself for that. Yeah, yes. Someone up here said, "Wait." Yeah. And so we have things that are fully matured. Now, we look at the things that are going to be created, and remember, we haven't even got to day 4 on which He's going to create the stars, the moons, and everything else that is up there. So He's creating all of these plants full grown, but there's also something, and Wilma, did you say it? Everything reproduces after its kind, just like today. I plant corn, and I get crabgrass. It's just like magic, that's right. No, when I plant corn, I get corn. That's one of those laws that God has set in there, that everything produces after its kind.
Even with all the hybridization of apples and whatnot, they still produce a seed, they still produce a fruit. You don't know what it's going to be because there's combined fruit trees as part of the apple. But it still produces an apple per se. Still fruit.
Yep, still does. Still does. And so we get that. We have the dry land appears. Now, if this is an age, think of this in terms of He has created these plants, but He hasn't created a sun to help them and bugs to help them reproduce yet. So they have to go for eons without this aid of reproduction. So that's one of the things if you have a point to make. Jack? One day. One day. And so we get on third day. And then, verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs and for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from darkness. God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the 4th day. This is perhaps one of the most intriguing and troubling and puzzling parts of this, in which we're told by the whatever theory you want to come up with is that from this dense ball of solid matter that even you and I couldn't escape from, everything started, and then there was the stars and the nebulas, and everything came from that. And about another 10 billion years later, because the Earth, according to that, is 4.5 billion or 4.4, I'm not sure. I'll have to check with the scientists. That 10 billion years later, along comes the Earth. But here we read it's not that way. The Earth was created first. Mr. Copernicus came under a lot of fire in his day. Anybody know Copernicus? You have to go back a ways. But you know, Copernicus says, now wait a minute, I don't think we're the center of the universe. We're not really the center of the universe. And people said, wait a minute, no. We are the center of the universe because, after all, God created us and everything comes out from us. Whether we are the center of the universe or not is not the point. It tells us that God created the earth first. Then, days later, the stars. How did He do it? That's why I always ask if there's an astrophysicist in here, that maybe they could explain it. But that's the way that God did it. Can't explain it, but that's the way that God put it down for us. I've heard some great explanations as to how it is that light comes from hundreds of millions of light years away and makes it to us. Well, let's say it's 100 million light years away, how long did it take to get here? 100 million years, yeah, okay. According to that theory. But if plants and trees, and in another day we're going to read about some other things, were created full grown, then why is it unbelievable to think that God could create light and stars and it made its way?
Without coming from somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. There are theories out there, and I think they're great theories from people who are creationists that believe that God did create it and that we live in a young earth. But it is above my pay grade, just let me say.
And all our knowledge and all our technology, we cannot make one drop of rain.
No, we can't create something from nothing.
One drop of rain, we can't.
Yes. Yes, all of those things. So we have come down to this day in which God creates a greater light to rule the day, and which body of out there in the celestial is he talking about? The sun, good old Sol. I wish they'd come up with a better name like Fred or Pete or something like that we can call him, but it's good old Sol. That's the light that rules the day, and what rules the night? The moon. Okay? And the more that I read and study about such things is that we kind of go in an elliptical orbit around the sun. But the moon is just the right size at just the right distance. And we don't realize this until we see a lunar eclipse, when the moon comes between the sun and the earth. Has anybody seen a lunar eclipse? Solar eclipse. Solar eclipse, when the moon comes between it. A complete and total one is something to behold. Yeah. Janine and I were down in Tennessee at one of the conferences, and we just happened to be there. And we said, well, where we were at, it was 99.8%. But it wasn't quite 100%. We had to go about 40 miles to the west in Tennessee in order to see it. And I thought, okay, we had the glasses, we found the glasses, and we saw it. But up until the moment that it goes behind the sun goes, or the moon passes in front of the sun, it is just like this. And in a moment, just like that, it becomes dark. And then they have the diamond ring effect as it comes out, and you have to wear the glasses, but the moon is just the right size that it just barely covers the sun. It'd have to be at just the right distance and just the right size, and everything about the moon. Any fishermen here? Nobody likes to fish. But you know all about the tidal system as it pertains to when the best times to catch fish. You know the best time for me to catch fish? When I go to Myers through the meat division. Because when I go, nobody catches fish. But when it explains here that it is, let's see, let the lights be expanse, and it was so, God made the two great lights, a greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars, set them in the expanse of heaven to give light to the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate light from dark. I read up past it. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. It is so precise that 10,000 years from now, they will say there's going to be a solar eclipse on this day in this part of the world at this exact time. That's how precise our universe is. It's absolutely amazing and guides so many things. Any gardeners here? Any farmers? If Jan was here, I would ask Jan, do you plant on the new moon or the full moon around Easter time? How many of you plant according to the moon? It's not witchery or black magic, really, it isn't, but because it tells us here that it's according to seasons and times. But some people plant their gardens according to those the signs of the moon and the seasons. They're there for us. Even today, the moon the full moons have names for it. The harvest moon and the when the Tigers win the World Series moon. And
You just mentioned one last week, 2 weeks ago, the summer solstice.
Mhm.
It marks the Afro-American Week. That's how we track our calendar.
Yep. And we know the exact minute when it happens. We don't realize it, but they know that exact time. So here we have come down to that, of which we have in day 4.
Stuff, but this didn't all work on a regular basis. When they sent a rocket up, they would not be able to predict where it's gonna land and what time it's gonna land, but they can figure that all out mathematically because the universe is working like a clock. And it does certain things at certain times, and they can bring that rocket ship up to the moon and back down on a spot.
Because it is so precise. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If they're going to send something to Mars, and I say, well, there's Mars, let's just shoot for that. No, they don't do that, because Mars isn't going to be there, relatively speaking, when they get there. It's going to be somewhere else. But according to mathematics of how precise our universe is, they know exactly how fast it's going to go and when it will get there. It's how precise that it is.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's another thing. When you take off, it's got the moon, or like when they land on the moon is going like this, Earth going, and yet they can figure out
Mhm.
to hit.
Yes, in ways that I can't do when I'm hunting partridge, which is to lead the, but that's different. Should try hitting a curveball. I could wicked hit when it was on the tee. But, yes, stick to your math classes in school. Verse 20, and God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. And so God created great sea monsters, and every living thing that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 5th day. So we come down to the 5th day here, and I know you can't read that or see a lot of these things, but He creates all the birds that fly in the heavens. He creates all the sea creatures underneath the seas, and that is what happens on day 5. It is interesting that He creates the birds before He creates the mammals, but we'll get to that in just a moment. And according to scientists, they say that from birds came other creatures. You've heard that one, right? But there's one thing missing, the missing link. There's always the missing link. Always the missing link. I think we can connect these, but they never will. They just won't connect it. So we have the 5th day, and He says, let the birds multiply on the earth. He blessed them, be fruitful and multiply. We come down to verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. But wait, there's more. He has created all of the bugs and the creeping creatures and insects and all the animals that are on there, and he uses the term their kind in that. And that will come into play when we get down to the Genesis chapter 6, when we talk about how could there possibly be room enough in that ark for all of the millions and millions and millions of kinds. Well, how many dogs would you have to have? Every single breed? Well, no. You just have to have the male and the female, and it says that there were 2 of those kinds, 2 pairs. Out of that genetic makeup will come all of those. And the same with cats and horses and swine and bears and lions and tigers, all of that. Oh my. But it says here for the kinds, and that will be a word that's going to come into play. Now we come down to 26, verse 26. For the arguably, you could make this case of the pinnacle of God's creation, as great as the Andromeda galaxy far, far away and all of the nebulas, as great as the mountains, as great as the oceans, as great as everything. He has one left. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." Note that there. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made. And behold, it was okay. Behold, it was very good. Behold, it was very good. There's a qualifier on this Hebrew word. It was very good. And there was evening and morning the sixth day. That's a lot of creating on that day. But the earth is ready. All the plants are there for it to eat. All of the birds and the fishes in the sea, they're all there. Everything's ready for man to be ruler over. Now that's a difficult concept for some in the world today, because man is not over all of creation to them. We're equal. In fact, some plants have equal status with man in their protection. I believe it's either Sweden or Holland, somewhere over in northern Europe, they have given equal status to a plant. And we're not talking about a protected species, but they have given equal status to a plant. I don't know how that works, but it does. We're not in charge of this planet. But God says, I say that because people say that, but God says, "I've given you dominion over everything." And notice, it's not to kill animals. It is to subdue them and have dominion over them. That's pretty amazing.
Each time before Matthew, it records that it was good. Yet in this last instance, it was very good. Is there something special here? Is this referring to man? Why was it just good before, but now it's very good? Or is it because it's the last creation of the sixth?
But verse 31 says, "And God saw everything that he made." Each day he looked at what he had made on that day and said, "It's good." But here he looks at everything that he made. Everything, the whole, and said, "It is very good."
Could you make an argument that the man was the major focal point there? Because when you move on to chapter 2, you'll see that man was lacking something. And that's when he actually went through and kind of looked to find him a mate or find someone suitable for him. So I guess I've always thought about that as being very good, specifically after the man was created. But it's interesting that you make the point that it does say everything.
Mhm.
That's overall.
Yes, it is on this day 6 that he creates woman. Chapter 2 expands on that point that he makes here. He didn't create woman several days later, because it says that he made everything. He was through creating at the end of day 6. So chapter 2 is not another creation that took place somewhere else, but he's talking about this. He says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness."
All other living creatures, plants and animals that are created prior to this are created after their own kind. It doesn't say that here. They're created after their own kind.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good point to make that everything else was after its kind, and as you say, man wasn't created after another kind. Man was created in the image of God. Did I say that correctly? Okay.
And also the plural word too, he created them, not singular term, it. So he says he created man and woman. Adam and Eve are specifically created, but he created male and female as a group.
Yeah, and when we get to chapter 2 and it talks about that Adam is going to name all of these animals, you think, man, that must have been a long day. A long day. He must have created him right here at the beginning, because he's going to take him a long time to name all those animals. Remember, they're kinds, so there's not 500 different breeds of dogs. You know, there may have only been just a couple there. But be that as it may, let us make man in our image. And there's the plurality, and I brought up this fact because Elohim, the term for God that has been used throughout here, we won't get into the Lord God until we get into the second chapter, but God, that Elohim, that, as Daniel calls it later in his book, the Ancient of Days, which we call today perhaps our Father, and then you have the Word, and then you have the Holy Spirit. That is the Godhead. That's how it's described in the New Testament, the Godhead. But He create man in our image. Does that tell us something about what God looks like? If you go to the Sistine Chapel, which I might add, Janine and I went, funny story, we went to see the Sistine Chapel when we were in Rome. It was closed that day. It was closed. Yeah, and all I wanted, the one that I really wanted to see was when Michelangelo put that moment of creation. When you know, the famous, boy, it's just right there, when God reaches down to man. Is that what it looked like? Well, it must be, because Michelangelo drew it. We have no idea what it looks like. I've seen some great artists that show God molding man out of the dust of the earth, molding him. I've read to where people have said, now let's break down every element, every chemical in man's body and see what man is worth, because we have so much carbon in us, we have so much of this element and that element. And the last I looked, and I don't know if this has been for inflation, less than $10 worth of stuff. Yes, but you know, in its pure chemical analysis state. You know, you can buy zinc for so much an ounce.
There's a company out there that will take your ashes and actually make a diamond out of it.
If they can make a diamond out of me, I'm telling you, they'll be doing something. Now, Janine, yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah, they can do that. I saw that. It's come out in the last few years. Yeah. And it tells us that He's going to make man out of the dust of the ground. Everything else, it tells us that He created. But of man, He makes him out of the dust of the ground. And to make man in our image after our likeness. That absolutely astounds me when I think that, does God have as much hair as me? How's his fingernails, man? It's not really talking about our physical, but it's talking about the image of God after our likeness.
You still got a chance, because geologically, you got a lump of coal before you got a diamond.
Yeah. Lump of coal is probably as close as I'm going to get. But God gives something to man, and we'll get into that when we get down there, that He's going to breathe a breath of life into us.
Isaiah says that is God's hand too short that He cannot reach? Is His hearing and His eyesight so dim that He cannot see? So, we get a connection with He's watching over us. Sure, watching.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have to come up with hands and feet and those type of things, although it helps us in our own mind. But the idea that we are special, that God, I love dogs, not so much cats.
He made cats.
Yeah, He didn't make cats? Okay, well, good. But all of those things, but for you and I, God gave us something special. And as Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 3:11, he says, He has set eternity in man's heart, but yet so that he cannot see the end from the beginning. We can't figure it all out, but we have been given something special within ourselves. And someone go ring that bell, and that'll tell us we are out of time. But any questions that you have that Wilma can answer? It's an absolutely fabulous chapter of the creation.
Yeah, well, it is one thing about the order of creation, from the simplest to the more complex, and that's what they teach in biology class, except they do say they called out, anyway, the textbook I was looking at when I was subbing it crawled out of the watchers. But we do know that there's a difference between the animals and things and the plants and man, because we have a responsibility for determining our own path, whereas the dog and the cat and the corn can't.
Mhm. Yes, and just consider when you go to the zoo, which side of the bars are you on?
And why?
Yes. Yeah, it's anything else? It could be, could be. The difference between a southern zoo and a northern zoo is in a northern zoo, they give pictures of the animal. In a southern zoo, they give you the recipe for it. Should have stopped before that, I know. Okay, class is dismissed.